Hello everybody and welcome back to Operation Logistics, where we are in a bit of an awkward spot right now. In order to really progress here, we kind of need to know what is inside of our base hexes, right? So we click here, and obviously we then get all of these subhexes, which is fine. But there's a couple of things we need to know about these subhexes from here, right? So we can come in here, and we can come in here, and we can see, oh, okay, well, we've got ourselves, say right here, we've got ourselves, I forget what this is supposed to be. I don't remember. But we've got ourselves a factory, and we've got ourselves a store, and all that fanciness. I've actually completely forgotten what the barn is supposed to represent. Let's check. So let's go ahead and come down over to warehouse? No. The barn here is supposed to represent a brewery. Okay, I guess that's fine. Also, I think that the Z fighting is happening because we are in orthographic? Yes. Okay. Also noticing we have a few matching up issues, but we can fix those later on. So, let's just go ahead and take a quick look at the inside of our base hex. And let's take a quick look at what we actually have in here. So, as soon as Visual Studio fires up... Come on, there we go. So we've got our list of subhexes, actually. And when does that get populated? Like, realistically, when does that get populated? Only when we click on it, I believe? Selected world hex if we are left-clicking and we are overriding camera, otherwise... Actually, if we're right-clicking and overriding camera, and if we are left-clicking and not overriding the camera, then we generate our biomes. So yeah, it gets populated at this time, I think. Because we set our selected world hex here. So let's go into our subhex manager, which it's been a while since we've been in there, hasn't it? So I think that's just not open, actually. So our subhex manager is right here. And let's check. So we generate biomes, classification, and seed. The seed, I believe, comes from the full-on base hex, correct? We've got our biome seed here. And then, yes, so the seed comes from our base hex. That's fine. And then public list subhexes here. This is our seeds. I'm just wondering when we pass in the subhexes here. I think that's in generate biomes. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, something along those lines. I think the subhex list is actually preset. Oops, I did not mean to break that. But I think if we go in here... nope, it is not preset. Okay. Well, that's okay. Let's just head on into our base hex here. And for right now, I'm going to, real quick, I want to know what happens, what breaks, if we comment that out. Nothing? Subhexes was just not used? Is that true? Let's see if this breaks. No. It's just not used at all. Okay. So then if we also go into subhex, which would be right here, we can then see here that we do not have any lists here, so that's fine. So then if this is not used, then what we can do is we can create a new class here, and this would just be a data store class. And actually, I'm going to do it in a new script. So let's go into scripts here, and we will create a C# script, and I'm going to call this hex store for right now. Yeah, we can go ahead and reload that solution. That'll be fine. And we can delete the mono behavior. This is just a data storage class. So realistically, I don't know that we'll need much of that at all. So let's go ahead and create a public enum hex level right here. And this will be world sub, or actually we'll do world biome building. That's what we're going to call those from now on-ish. Instead of hex, sub-hex, and sub-sub-hex, I think world hex, biome hex, building hex. And just to make this a little clearer, I'll add in hex. So building hex. There we go. So public class hex store. First thing we're going to do is public hex level. We're going to need that. We're going to need public int hex seed. And that, I believe, is currently here in the biome seed. I don't think we have a seed in the subhex, but we may have a separate one. Oh, we do have a building seed here. Okay. We can probably use the same seed and consolidate those together. So public int hex seed. And then what else do we need? Well, we need a couple of things. We need a public hex, and this is going to be a hex classification, I think, if I recall correctly. Let's peek definition there. Yes, public hex classification, and this would be simply our world type. And then let's have a public, oop, I did not type that correctly, public, and then this will be a biome. So biome, there we go, public biomes biome. And then finally a public buildings building. Do we need to store any other data? We need to store possibly the rotation of the building. I'm not sure if we'll be needing that. But that's possibly something we would need. And then let's also go ahead and do a public int xid, just to be safe. And then let's also create ourselves one final little thing here. And that is something along the lines of public class hex, or rather public class virtual hex manager, something like that. And this can be a mono behavior. And essentially all this is an interface to access these hex stores. So we can do something along the lines of public list of hex store, stored hexes. And then we can also, and I'm going to go ahead and initialize that, equals new list hex store. There we go. And then we can also do something along the lines of public void destroy hex, or destroy stored hex. I don't know that we'll actually need that, but we can also do public void destroy, or actually create stored hex. Again, I don't know that we'll actually need this for right now, but it would be nice to have it. So then int hex ID and int hex ID. We're not going to implement these yet, so just unimplemented. There we go. unimplemented. We'll just have them there just in case. And then public hex store get hex int hex ID, and then for int I equals 0, I is less than stored hexes dot count I plus, iterate through all of the stored hexes. If stored hexes I dot hex ID equals hex ID, return stored hexes I. There we go. And if it doesn't return anything after that, we can just return null. We can do debug.log, and that would be something along the lines of virtual hex manager.getHex, and it would be returning null due to unknown hex ID. There we go. And then as far as create stored hex goes, all we would do probably is something along the lines of, realistically, we don't even have to iterate through this if we would do it that way. We can't necessarily guarantee it because this is public. We could make this be a private list. And then we could say something along the lines of... I think I'll leave it the way it is. It'll be fine. And then for create stored hex, we would just say... I mean, realistically, I think I'm just not going to implement this. Bring this back to public, and we'll just use this purely to access it. Or maybe we'll just completely get rid of the virtual hex manager. I think we will. I don't think we need it, now that I think about it. I feel like that was just a waste of time, but that's fine. So we've got our hex level, our hex ID. So, yeah. I think we've got everything we need in our hex store. So then inside of our base hex, because our base hex would be something along the lines of public list, and this would be hex store, subhexes equals new list, subhex, and this would be a list of 73, because that is definitely, no, not of type subhex, of type hex store. There we go. And then we would need to populate this basically in the awake. So let's go ahead and do a generate biomes, but that's currently a void. So real quick, in our subhex manager is where we generate biomes. So that is subhex manager is here. So our subhex manager would be, that's here's subhex manager. Okay. Oh, this is, you know, a little exciting. I'll place that right there. And then this is generate biomes here. So realistically, generate biomes should probably be somewhere a little bit else. I mean, clear biomes is still good, but generate biomes should be moved and rewritten to take advantage of this new system, right? So I think we go ahead and do that. I'm just trying to think of how I want to do this exactly. So I mean, generate biomes should probably be moved into base hex if we're going to do it this way, and it would be done in this list here. We can get rid of that list entirely. And then in the subhex manager, generate biomes could be moved into the base hex. So we go ahead and take that on out of there. And then place this in base hex, probably right about here. There we go. Now we don't have all of this, but that's okay. There's going to be lots of errors. That's to be expected. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and hide generate biomes. And we're going to come down here and say, instead of subhexmanager.generate biomes, this should be taken completely out. Either that, or this should be set to, like, populate biomes. But I think for right now, generate biomes can be just commented out. And then right here, we're just going to go ahead and say, generate biomes. And we don't really need the classification or the seed, so we can get rid of that. Because we don't need to pass that in. So random.init state, and then instead of seed, we would use biome seed, like so. We don't need to clear biomes. So if classification equals classification.water or classification equals classification.default, return. If it's rural, then number equals number of Voronoi seeds. So we can go ahead and move that from subhex manager. And we can move all of this out of here and into the base hex, which would mean we'd be able to do this on a hex by hex basis, theoretically. So we can place this right here. Okay. So we're now down to 10 errors. And this actually just works plug and play, mostly. Okay, we don't need that in seeds. Seeds needs to be not a list of subhexes, but rather a list of hex stores. So we can do that. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, what's our next error? So we don't have a set overlay color. We don't have a transform. That's to be expected. Instead of subhex, this needs to be hex store. So that equals seed 0. And realistically, I would very much like for this to be, and this isn't really going to work, but I'd very much like for this to be system.serializable. But because it's a list, it's not going to really work that way. Okay, so we don't have transforms, which is certainly a little bit challenging. How do I want to do that? Because we do need to know the position. It's a very good question. Like the set overlay color, this would be done in the populate function, if there was such a thing. So for right now, we could theoretically comment this out, like so. And then all we need is the ability to access the transform location of these, but that doesn't exactly exist. We could just simply add in, right here, a public vector3 position. That's a possibility. Now, of course, because that's not currently being set, that's not going to do anything. It's all going to be vector3.0 by default. So maybe what we need to do is we need to do this right here at the beginning of generate biomes, just so that we know where our subhexes are. I mean, that would do the trick. And then we could theoretically, down here, we could set in I and J. What are we doing with I and J here? Subhexes I. Okay. Subhexes I dot position equals subhex manager, or rather, just what did I call that? What did I call that? Yeah, subhex manager. Subhex manager dot subhexes I dot transform dot position. Okay, so we got that. Okay. So then the question is, do we want each subhex to have its own, or rather, do we want each world hex to have its own biome hex? Like its own group of biome hexes, or do we want to continue using this pooling method that we've got right now, which is, granted, way more efficient? I'm not exactly sure. Let's test how it works if we put in a subhexes prefab, and I call this biome hexes. So let's see what happens if we do that. We delete that right there, and then when we create this up here, we say something along the lines of subhex manager equals game object dot instantiate, and we're going to need to get biome hexes dot get component, and this would be subhex manager, like so. And then we would need a reference to our biome hexes. So we would need a public game object biome hexes prefab, and that would be biome hexes prefab there as well. And then in Unity here, we should be able to, in our base hex, set up that prefab. In our world hex even. And that would go right here. Now it bears noting that we lost our colors, apparently. We can get them back though from this right here, so that's fine. Okay, this is probably going to break horribly. But let's see. Let's see what it does. Oh boy. Object reference does not exist. Base hex line 47. Oh, because we're doing subhex manager before we're doing generate biomes. Yep. So subhex manager is actually set in generate biomes, so we don't need to do that anymore at all. Might actually speed up our generation a little bit, but probably not. Okay. Let's see how badly this breaks. Pretty badly? Oh boy. I kind of expected this to be a bit on the slow side, because these are all generating their own, and so we have a lot of hexes being generated right now. Like a whole lot of hexes being generated right now. Perhaps an absurd amount of hexes being generated. Yeah, this is maybe a lot. We are in a situation right now where Unity is maxing out one core, but it's just kind of chilling. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a cut in here, and next episode, we're going to go ahead and see how long it takes to run this. I'm going to guess it's going to be a while. See you all then.